right. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I apologize for that. Just getting this live stream all situated, trying to figure out how to screen share and things. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. If you can't, just let me know. We already have some questions coming through, and we'll start answering these in just a second. But just before we get started, if you haven't been here before, thank you for joining. My name is Matt. I'm a therapist in private practice. I also have a group practice, and I also like to help people on their private practice journey, whether that be solo practice, private practice, group practice, and every so often I like to have what I would call these private practice office hours where people can log in or just click on YouTube and ask some questions, and hopefully we can provide some guidance, some direction. This is something that I wish I had access to when I was starting out. A lot of questions and a lot of unanswered questions that I had trouble answering. So today we'll start answering questions, and I actually had some leftover questions from last time that we did not get to. So we will start with those. And I am going to pop up the question right here. It should pop up on the screen. So someone had asked about PLLCs and DBAs. How do we go about setting those up? And this is a great question. It's something that a lot of people want to know about. Having a PLLC or establishing a DBA or both is something that's really helpful. Just a little bit of context. A PLLC is a business entity. And a business entity is what you establish to formulate a business. It basically separates you as a person and your business and creates separation there. Now, there's a lot of confusion. People think that when they establish a PLLC, that they're going to be protected from malpractice, or their finances will be protected from lawsuits and things. This is not the case. At least in the state of New York, when you have a PLLC, you are still liable for any malpractice that goes on. Your business, your personal finances, all of it. So a PLLC will not protect you and your finances from malpractice. That's what people think it does. It does not do that. A PLLC will protect you from an employee's malpractice mistakes and things like that. So if you start a group practice, you're going to need a PLLC or a business entity. And in that regard, then my employee's mistake I'll be protected from that, right? So a PLLC is really going to benefit people who are thinking about establishing a group practice at some point in the future. Now, I know for me personally, I had some loose thoughts about having a group practice, and so I established the PLLC before I even started. And I thought that was a good decision. It takes it varies, but for me, I think it took about 6-7 months to fully establish. And so that's a little bit of context there. So if you're not thinking about a group practice, or that's not really on your radar, you might want to consider if a PLLC is the best option for you. Another way that you can create separation between like you and a business is by establishing what's called a DBA, a doing business as. Now, I'm not an accountant or an attorney, so I don't have everything down to a perfect science, and so you can't take this as legal or financial advice. But I have consulted with attorneys and accountants, and what you can do without establishing a PLLC is establish a DBA. This takes 24, 48 hours. It's fairly simple. I think the cost of that is fairly low. If I remember correctly, I think it's under $250. And what that essentially does, it allows you to conduct business underneath a different name. So if my name is Matt Ryan and I'm running a solo private practice and I haven't established a DBA or anything like that, then I have one, my personal bank account or my joint bank account with my spouse or whatever, and you do business that way, right? And that's not the wisest thing to do, especially in private practice, because you don't want your business finances being muddied up with your personal finances. And so you do want to create that separation there. And instead of a PLLC, you can do the DBA, and then that allows you to choose a name through which you conduct business. So maybe it's Therapy Works, I don't know, something like that you choose a name, and then you can actually get an EIN and open a business bank account. So a DBA is another way of going about things. Now it gets even more complicated because you can have a PLLC and then get a DBA on top of that, which would allow you to have your original PLLC name, and then the DBA would allow you to have another name, right? So when I established my PLLC, it was just for me as a private practice owner, and it was my name, LCSW PLLC. And then I started a group practice, and I didn't want that to be the name. So then it switched over to being PRGRS Therapy, LCSW Services. I established a DBA. Now the question is, how do you go about doing this? So I was gonna screen share, but it's not working. What I'm gonna do to leave links down below. But if you Google something like established PLLC, the first several hits are gonna be these sponsored ads. And these are people trying to sell you services and things like that. What you wanna do is navigate to the state website, the official .org or .gov website, and it will lay out the steps that you need to take. New York just updated their website, so it's actually pretty clear. I will leave links to the PLLC and the DBA down below, the state of New York website. You can take a look at what that looks like. You want to kind of skip over those sponsored ads at first because it's, again, people selling you things, and you want to check out the official website. Now, I did not use the official website and just do it by myself. I actually worked with a company called Capital Services. I'll leave links to them down below as well. They don't know I talk about them. I just had a really good experience with them, and I continue to use them. And Capital Services is a company that will establish the PLLC for you. So they'll do all the paperwork. They'll help you, they'll help you fill it out. They'll coordinate with the state for you. They know all the requirements. They also help me do my DBA. And you do pay them a fee to help you out. However, that fee is, in my opinion, it's worth it for the time that you save. If you do it on your own, you're going back and forth. You have a good chance of filling things out incorrectly, and it gets all delayed. With them, one shot. Nothing was incorrect. It all got done correctly the first time. They helped me with it, and the cost was totally worth it. They did my PLLC and they did my DBA. And so you can, look for a company like Capital Services. They're great. Highly recommended. The other question someone else asked in regards to PLLC was, how do you do an address change? If you look at the New York State website, there's a contact info there. You would simply call them, let them know you changed your address. They probably have a form for you to fill out. But again, one of the benefits of working with a place like Capital Services is that I was able to just tell them I changed my address, and they did it all for me. And the address change was, I don't think there was any cost with that. It was just, hey, I updated. Can you update this for me? And they did it. So highly recommended there. So that was one leftover question. Hopefully that is helpful, point you in the right direction. And then someone else asked, they asked about billing for LMSWs, especially when people are using services like ALMA or Headway. And this person was curious to know what group owners are doing to bill when they use Headway. So if I just answer that question, so the first thing is LMSWs, or provisionally licensed people. This is people who require supervision. They are never allowed to be on ALMA and Headway, at least as it stands today, right? So provisionally licensed therapists are not able to bill through ALMA or Headway. And you're not able to, be the LC, supervise, and, bill through ALMA and Headway for LM. So LMs are out of the question for ALMA or Headway. So that leaves a couple options left. One is the cash pay model. You don't work with insurance, you do cash pay. Some people go down this road. More difficult, you have to market. It's harder to fill up people that way. And then the other option is you can panel with insurance companies independently. And a few of these insurance companies will allow you to do what's called incident to or supervisory billing. And there's a whole procedure for doing that. But if we put it in a simple way, that basically allows me, the LC, to supervise my employee who's an LM. The LM renders the service, and then it gets billed through my NPI. Now, it's a little bit more complex. There's different things you have to do in order to be in compliance with supervisory billing. But as far as I know, in the state of New York, Cigna and Aetna are currently allowing for it. And this would then allow you to have LMSWs and bill insurance companies for their services. All right, so that is one thing. And then in addition to that question, the person also asked if I've hired anyone to help me with credentialing and billing once I brought on staff. So I did actually hire a company to help me with credentialing. This was because of the cost of time, basically. It would take me too much time to get all the credentialing done on my own. I hired a company called Greenpoint Med. They were great. They were really responsive. They got the job done. I had a good experience with them. It is certainly a cost. It's not minimal, so it is an investment. So you have to just kind of decide if the investment is worth it for you and your practice, because you can also do it on your own. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of back and forth. And if you call some place like Greenpoint or another credentialing company, you want to ask them, what their rates are. They'll give those to you before committing. And then billing. I also have not hired a company to do my billing. That is something I want to learn to do on my own. So I've coordinated and connected with billers in a way that I have them help me and teach me, how to bill. So I'm learning about that process now. And the reason for that is so that if I do hire a biller, I'll know exactly what it is that they do and how to do it. So I want to learn that myself. And I will say that is certainly a learning curve. It is certainly possible to do that. You can learn billing, especially when you're starting out with only a few employees or employees with small caseloads. And then I can see how it could quickly become overwhelming and too time consuming. And then from there, you might want to hire a billing company. But if you're interested in learning, I think it's doable. And that way, when you do hire, you know exactly what you're looking for. Or alternatively, I know people who just outsource it right out of the gate. That's fine too. I think it all comes down to preference. All right, so we got a bunch more questions coming in, so we'll go ahead and start answering these. Let's see. So what are some marketing tools you have used besides Psychology Today, ALMA, and Headway? This is a great question. I have done several things, and I'll just go through a few of them. I've done something as like, I've done flyers before, right? So I've done something like that where I've gone out into the community and I've posted flyers about my practice and what we do. So I've done old school methods like that. I've also done Facebook ads and Instagram ads. So I designed a couple videos, I designed a couple, images, and then I kind of learned how to use the Facebook ads manager, which then allowed me to put ads on Facebook and Instagram. And that was helpful. I think with that kind of method, you have to invest a decent amount of money. And I didn't invest that much, but I invested some just to kind of see. I could see the potential. But for where I'm at in my practice, I didn't continue the Facebook or Instagram ads, but that is an option and it is helpful for people. That again is a learning curve. It's a financial investment, but that method is definitely effective because you can target an audience. It's really good. Going back to the flyers, this is an old school approach where it's like a piece of paper and I taped it up in like a coffee shop or places where people go. I think this is surprisingly effective at times. And then the most effective is probably networking and making videos and making content and putting yourself out there in that way. Now, I know this kind of thing is not marketing, my group practice or anything like that. But, I think when you make valuable content or something, it could be like a small snippet in a video, it could be an image, an infographic, and you put that out there on social media or anywhere like that. You're able to advertise yourself that way, and I think that can also be valuable. That's a method I like to use as well. And here's another question. If we do not have a HIPAA compliant email, can we just have clients sign consents about risks? Sorry, it got cut off on my screen. Risks, etc. before sending out info so that we can still abide by HIPAA. So this is a good question. I actually made a video about this. I'll link that down below. But my understanding after consulting with an attorney is that therapists have to have a HIPAA compliant method of communication available. However, if a client does not want to use it, then that is up to them. And it is important to have them sign a disclosure, a form, basically that says that they're acknowledging the risks of using unencrypted email, unencrypted communication, non-HIPAA compliant communication, and that an option for that, for HIPAA compliant is available and it's been offered to them. So after consulting the attorney, he said, yes, if clients sign that, then you are able to communicate with them in ways that they prefer. Again, they just have to sign. It's basically an informed consent about using the non-HIPAA compliant form of communication. So someone's asking, can you please share the main things needed in a session note to pass an audit? So at this particular point in time, I have not been through an audit personally. And from my understanding, there's no cookie cutter kind of response or kind of things that you can kind of do to kind of make sure everything is perfect. But I will say that if you go on Facebook and you join one of the groups, a couple of the groups that I like that provide a lot of information in regards to this, and I'll leave links to them down below as well. They're the insurance and credentialing and billing Facebook groups. One of them has like 20,000 members. There's tons of discussion about audit and what people do and how to kind of prevent it. And there's experience of people going through it. So I'll leave that link down below. I think they would be in a really good place to answer that question specifically, seeing as I have not gone through one. I don't want to mislead or provide information that's not helpful. So I'm going to guide you there, and I'll leave links to that down below. Someone's asking, they're saying, I thought we couldn't work with LMSWs on Headway and ALMA. You're correct. You cannot work with LMSWs on Headway or ALMA. You can only work with LCSWs. And then this leads me into, I guess, another point that people often ask is then how do you use ALMA or Headway for a group practice? Now, a couple of things. I think that between the two, Headway is the best option for a group practice. And that's because it allows you to create a group practice account. Right, so if you're in Headway, and let's say you hire an LCSW, an LMHC, fully licensed folks who are joining your practice, what you can do is then tell Headway that you have a group practice, you're the owner, and then they'll put different accounts underneath yours, and you could be the administrator, which means you're in charge of the billing, you're in charge of the back end stuff, and then you as the owner can kind of control all of that. Whereas ALMA, they don't have that feature. So if you were to use ALMA as a group practice platform, basically all of your therapists would have to sign up independently, go through the credentialing independently. Everything would be independent. And then somehow you'd have to figure out how to access their accounts or have them do the billing. It's actually not really set up for a group practice. So I don't usually advise that option. I think Headway's better for that. At the end of the day, though, only fully licensed folks can be paneled on ALMA or Headway for a group practice. Can I place the link for credentialing? Absolutely. I will put a link down below. And just to be really clear, I used a place called Greenpoint Med. I don't work with them like in any sort of like promotional aspect. They have no idea I'm making this video. My point is to share with you and everyone watching resources that have been helpful for me, because there are so many out there. And I want to make sure like these word of mouth resources are legitimate, and I'm speaking from my own experience. They've worked, and I'll put links down below. Someone's asking, how do I grow my practice as a PMHNP? That's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And as an LCSW, I can share with you tips that help grow my private practice and things that I'm still doing to grow. I think growing is something we're always doing, always working on. I won't be able to speak to the nuances of being an NP, but I think a couple things that really have helped me grow a bit. And these kind of are in line with the marketing question we just went through. But I think the first thing that's really important is to begin creating a network. This has been my most valuable asset. And so when we think about a network, people often think of perhaps former colleagues or people you've met in grad school. But having that network has been really helpful, starting there, right? The people that were close to me as I was training and working, that's been really great. And then from there, though, I've worked to establish a different network or add to that network. And mainly what I've done is remained active in different online forums. So for example, ALMA, they have their online forum. I'm fairly active there, answering questions, asking questions, being a participant, trying to use that as a community. And then there are a couple of, not all of them, but some of Facebook groups also have that same kind of kind of community aspect. And that is where you will start to if you're consistent over time, you do start to develop a community and you're able to help your practice grow, because then people are familiar with what you do and who you are, and you're answering questions and you're asking questions, you're providing value, you're contributing. And so that is one of the methods that I think it goes under. No one really talks about that too much, but I think that method has been really, really helpful for me. If you want to grow your practice, I also think that there is a lot of validity in kind of one-on-one interaction. So if you can get an email address of someone and introduce yourself that way. And then you have standard methods like Psychology Today, Headway, ALMA, and good old-fashioned patience. I think people often don't talk enough about how hard the beginning stages are of practice growth. A lot of people, they don't share that. But it's an emotional roller coaster. It's really difficult in the beginning. It's often very slow. And I want to normalize that. So if you're just starting out, I'm not exactly sure where you are in your journey. If you're just starting out, it's normal for things to be slow. There are also slow seasons, even if you've been in private practice for a while. And then there's seasons where things speed up and everything in between. And if you also want to grow and you want to step outside the kind of normative methods of Psychology Today, just the standard things like that, you might want to invest in Facebook ads, perhaps hiring a marketing company to help you. This is going to put your service in front of many more people than you can do on your own. So something to consider, certainly a cost, but it may be a rewarding cost for you in the long run. Do session notes need to be typed? I use a device called Remarkable in which I can write my notes in manually and during session. Is that suffice enough? It's a time saver. It's a great question. I'm going to give you kind of my, what I've heard and what I've seen. Again, not legal advice, but it is my understanding that it is fine to have handwritten notes. I was actually talking to a colleague the other day, and they work for a state agency, and they still use paper documentation. I don't think there's anything wrong with paper documentation. I think you still have to follow the same HIPAA compliant guidelines, the same note-taking guidelines as you would on an electronic EMR. You're just doing it on paper. So think about it that way. As long as you follow all the guidelines, handwriting is fine. They have to be secured. They have to be not accessible to anyone. They have to be, contain all the things that anything would. I think what makes an EMR easier is that all that stuff is kind of built in, right? So if you use something like Simple Practice, security is built in, storage is built in. If you're handwriting, you have to find a way to store that securely, to make sure it's not breached, this kind of thing. But handwriting itself, there shouldn't be a problem with that. Great question. Right. So, and I think I noticed my live stream is lagging a bit. My computer is very old, so I apologize. It might lag. It's not as smooth as I'd like it to be. But yeah, if you guys have more questions, keep them coming in. If you're just joining us, you just leave questions in the chat box right there, wherever it is on your screen, and we'll go ahead and answer them. I'm going to be hanging out for a little while, so happy to answer more questions. I'm going to check the email to see if any have come through. Let's see here. All right. And while we're waiting for more questions to come in, I did want to touch on another topic that people often ask about. People wanted to know about hiring W-2s versus 1099s. Now, this is for people who are doing, a group practice or thinking about hiring. This is a very complex topic. So I want to make it clear that it's hard to simplify things. I actually did make a video about this topic. I'll leave that down below as well. But just to give a starting point to the difference between W-2 and 1099, because this is a big discussion people have when starting a group practice. People often think that they can just simply pick which one they want. Like, oh, I think 1099 sounds good because it's cheaper, so I'm going to do that. Or, I'm going to do a W-2 because, that seems really great. And that's not really the way to think about it. A couple things you have to keep in mind. The first thing is to decide on the vision for your group practice, right? And the reason why I say that is because it's going to determine whether you go the 1099 route or the W-2 route. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say you start a group practice and you want to be really hands-off. You simply just want to provide a practice where other LCs who might just want to, or fully licensed people want to just, take on a couple extra clients at night, and you'll provide them access to your EHR. You'll do the marketing for them, and you don't want to supervise. You're going to be really hands off. You're just going to provide access to those things. In that regard, a 1099 would be totally fine. And to be clear, a 1099 is not an employee. It's a contractor. Think about it this way. I use this example a lot, if you see my other videos, if you hire a plumber to do work inside your home, you don't tell the plumber what to do. You don't tell them how to fix the bathroom. You don't tell them, they're actually a licensed professional on their own, and you pay them to do their services in your home for you, right? But they have their own business, a plumbing business. That's the same way you want to look at it at a 1099. You're hiring someone who's able to do work on their own to do work for you in your practice. So you actually can't tell them when to work, how many clients to see. They do that on their own. You are able to come up with an agreement with them and you can sign those things, but they're not your employee. You're contracting them. Now, the benefit of a 1099 is that you don't pay taxes for them. They pay their own taxes. You just submit, you give them, I think it's the 1099 at the end of the year, and it's very straightforward. You submit it, you just kind of pay them the rate you kind of agree to, whether it be a percentage or a flat rate. You pay that, you pay no taxes on it, and that's that, right? It's a done deal. Now, something to keep in mind is LMSWs cannot be 1099s, all right? So someone who requires supervision, at least in the state of New York, after I consulted with an attorney, they cannot be a 1099, all right? So only fully licensed people who can practice on their own can be 1099. So you got to really keep that in mind. That's a big deal. That impacts a lot of people's decision on which way to go. A W-2, on the other hand, is what you would consider an employee, right? And this is a far more costly option. Now, it's not so costly that it's unattainable. It is more costly, though. However, it's a choice you would make. Number one, if it's the way you want to go with if you want to have a practice where you supervise, you cultivate an environment, you have kind of like, policies and procedures, and you want to create like an organization basically, and you want control over that, the hours of operation, who works there, how many hours, this kind of thing, you have to choose W-2. You can't just choose 1099. Now, of course, you can make a 1099 fit that model somehow, but W-2 employees are going to be how you have to do that. That way you can establish what hours people work, how many clients they see. There's different rules and regulations you can put in place for your business, and that has to be a W-2. And if you want to hire LMs, again, it has to be a W-2. So regardless of what the cost is going to be. Now, there's no clear-cut cost, like it's going to cost this much and this much. It actually all is variable depending on how many hours people work, how much you decide to pay them, all that kind of thing. But with a W-2, there's a couple of things you have to do. One, you have to get on a payroll software because now you're running payroll. Platform I like to use is called Gusto. Number two, you have to get what's called workers' compensation. So this is insurance you pay for all of your employees. You have to get paid family leave. This is also what you provide for your employees. And short-term disability is another one. So there's a couple upfront costs that you're paying for each employee as long as you have them. And then you pay taxes on the payroll. So if you pay your employee X amount, you're also paying taxes. They're paying taxes, you're paying taxes. So it is more than a 1099. But again, it starts with what's your vision for your practice, who are you trying to hire? And that's kind of how you start to decide that process. So someone's asking about note-taking guidelines. And I think in this regard, again, I don't have a concrete answer. I think you'll get so many different opinions and so many thoughts my encouragement for this kind of question is I'm going to link the Facebook group down below, and there's people who have gone through audits, and there's people who will share their experience, and you have direct feedback about what has been required and things like that. And it's a question they'll answer. So I'm going to put that link down below. But another way you can kind of think about this is if you're able to connect with a social worker at a local hospital or mental health clinic, you might want to ask them what their note template looks like, if they're willing to share with you a little bit about it, because you know that hospitals and state-run agencies and things like this are going to be working to be in compliance. So another way to kind of figure it out is by maybe coordinating or connecting with someone who's in a state agency, a hospital, a big agency where they're, have a legal team and things like that. Someone's asking, are treatment plans needed to be done once a year? I've asked this question before and have gotten so many different responses. And, I get anywhere from it needs to be done every year to every 6 months to every 3 months. And again, I have not found a specific concrete answer. What you want to check, and again, I'll leave a link down to this below, is if you're in New York State or whatever state you're in, you want to go to the licensing office or the Office of Education. That's what it's called in New York. And they will give you, and it's usually fairly gray. They don't give you like the most specific, but I'll leave links to what I'm talking about down below and see what they're saying that you should do. I have found that most people are telling me every 6 months. That's currently my frequency. And so that is, again, very frustrating because no one gives you a specific answer to this. Do you still need Gusto if hiring a 1099? So Gusto is a payroll software. And technically you do not need Gusto. It might be overboard if you're only doing 1099. That's because for 1099, you're simply just providing the invoice, the 1099. That's all that's going back and forth. No taxes are being taken out, nothing like that. So Gusto, if you're only 1099, might be overkill. You can simply just do an invoice. So it's quite simple there. You can actually Google a template, 1099 invoice and check it out there. Very straightforward. Good question. All right, I think we're caught up on our questions. They're great so far. I'll hang out for a little while if questions come in. There's one I missed right here. Let's see. Okay. If you hire a 1099 via Headway, how do you present it so that they can prefer to work under you than with Headway, since they will also be an LC? I think what you're asking is if you hire 1099s who are fully licensed people and you're using Headway as your billing platform and things like that, how do you present it in a way that they would want to continue to work with you as opposed to just go out on their own? And this is a good question. People are often thinking the monetary aspect of things, right? If someone goes out totally on their own, then obviously, the financial implication is they're able to make more money out on their own versus with a inside of a group practice, and that's one implication. However, that's not the only thing people are looking for. Sometimes people are looking to develop a niche. So are you able to help people develop a specialty? Are you able to give them consultation and training on different things? What else does your group practice offer? I think for a lot of people, they're concerned about the financial implications, right? And, I can't pay as much as, a direct, if they get directly paneled. And I think, that's a concern that people have. At the same time, you also have to think about what is your group practice offering, and focus in on that. And you'll be surprised. People are sometimes looking to, grow and develop professionally. And this is really valuable for people. So I would have you think about that a little bit, and then kind of, think about it that way. But every employee has access to Google. They can, so my whole thing is to be as transparent as possible. Transparency is typically, it's the best policy, I think. So someone's asking, do I have experience with grow therapy? Funny enough, someone just mentioned this to me the other day, but I had never heard of it. I've never actually used it, but it looks similar to something like ALMA or Headway. I think the way I think about these platforms is that there's a lot of them popping up now, tools and startup companies that are looking to help people in private practice. And I think you want to think about it like, do people how is it going to serve your practice? And one thing people do is they think that like the startup company is going to be like the one-stop shop for everything. So for example, people think ALMA is going to be an EHR, marketing, billing, all that. Now ALMA does a great job with their credentialing. Your billing platform is really good, but EHR they're just now developing. It's not really quite there yet. They're not a guaranteed marketing source, so sometimes their referrals are good, other times they're not. It's just a directory. They're not out there pushing your practice every day, right? So it's not necessarily going to be a one-stop shop. None of these startups are a one-stop shop. The way I encourage people to think about it is you are the practice, right? You as an individual, provider, or a group, you are the main entity. And then from there, you want to think about what tools are going to help you grow. So if ALMA's billing tools are going to help you, by all means, go for it. If Grow Therapy says, hey, we can put your practice in front of a whole bunch of different people and you're likely to get referrals, then go for it. But think about it along those lines. What tools are going to work to help your practice grow? None of them are going to be perfect. No tool is going to solve every single problem. You most likely need to work with multiple tools, right? Screwdriver is a great tool. You can do a lot with it, but you can't do everything with it. So think about it that way. If you do, however, use Grow Therapy and you have experience with it personally, I would love to know about. I've never heard of anyone using it. I've just read about it. But if someone has experience with it, please put your comment in the box. Let us know. I'd love to hear about it. Someone asked, do I offer one-on-one consults? I do. I do one-on-one consults. I obviously make a lot of videos like this, try to make as much information as accessible as possible. And so if you feel like you need more than this or the videos that have been put out, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to chat. How do therapists structure a practice to include coaching services for clients? Should it be set up under a separate LLC? This is a great question. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so what I say is not legal advice. But in my consultations with a lawyer, they're two separate things. So therapy and coaching are two separate services. And from my understanding, therapy is clearly a licensed service, right? So you have to have a license to provide therapy. Hence the reason why you need a PLLC. It's required in the state of New York. You can't just have an LLC. You need a PLLC. And coaching, on the other hand, from my understanding, is not a licensed profession. It's fairly unregulated. I don't think there's a governing body over it. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. I don't know everything, but that's my understanding. And so in that case, I do think you might want to consult a healthcare attorney about how you would advertise the two different services to people, because they're two different things. I know there's blurriness between the two at times, but if you want to get really sure and make sure you're doing things correctly, I would consult a healthcare attorney who's going to be able to talk to you about the specifics of what a client needs to know, like informed consent wise. I actually use an attorney. His name's Bruce. I'll put his link down below in the description. He might be a really great resource. Great question. I think we just talked on this a little bit. what's considered coaching and what's considered clinical work. I do think there's a lot of blurriness here. And I think the main division, that I had just mentioned is one requires a license and one doesn't. Now, I don't know exactly where you draw the line. I think that the healthcare attorney, again, put the link down below, he actually knows all about that, and he will be able to give you specifics, exactly what you need to do. I'm going to leave his info down below for you. Do you make your practice open to Google Yelp reviews? It seems awkward to have public reviews of a therapy practice, but I have heard that these reviews can help attract new clients. It's a great question. I think this is going to be a mixture of preference and also kind of marketing tactics and things. Think about when you Google a restaurant or you Yelp a restaurant, and a restaurant doesn't have any reviews, right? You're, oh, I wonder why. Or, you usually look for the reviews. So in some regard, reviews are good and can be helpful and beneficial. I know there's this push for like doing Google My Business, and you kind of establish that. Right, if you do Google My Business, you can kind of basically open yourself up to these Google reviews. You get put on the Google map. And I've heard that this really helps for marketing. And I think like with anything else, reviews can both be good and productive, and there's also the risks involved with reviews, which we're all aware of, getting bad reviews. So I think from what I've read and what I've heard people say is that reviews can be tremendously helpful. People are often very scared of reviews. I think it does come down to, are you looking, it's basically to help you grow as a business, right? That's what it would be for. That's what a review is for. So something to consider, weighing the pros and cons of it. And then also knowing that regardless of whether you open Yelp or something like that, people can make reviews, right? So that's also a thing. Someone's asking, how do you get more referrals on ALMA? Sorry if this was already asked. So it was not asked, but we've been talking a little bit about marketing and growing our practices and how we use different tools. So a couple things, and I mentioned this a little bit before, but people think about ALMA and other like Psychology Today as like this is like my marketing and this is going to fill me up. Now, in some regard, these platforms, Psychology Today, ALMA, Headway, they serve their purpose. They do a good job. They're able to put your practice in front of some people, right? Because naturally people are going to these places to look for therapy. However, they're not marketing your practice. They're not pushing you and your practice specifically to an audience. They're not doing that. So the amount of referrals is there's an aspect of it that's out of your control entirely, right? You can't guarantee that on ALMA, Psychology Today, or Headway, you're going to get referrals. It's likely that you'll get referrals because people search there and there's a high volume of people looking, but there's a lot out of your control. And I think marketing and growing, there's elements that are out of our control, yet there's a lot of things we can do to help grow. So if you're looking to just simply get more referrals on ALMA, a few things that are in your control, the wording on your profile. What keywords are there? The words that people are looking for. They're looking for what your specialty is. Do you do DBT? Do you do CBT? Where did you go to school? You want to think about what is a client looking for, right? And put those keywords prominently in your first couple of sentences, all right? So that's one way you can kind of think about ALMA. A profile picture, right? Something that looks really professional, perhaps a professional headshot. I don't mean you need to go to a studio to get that done. You can get a very professional looking headshot with just your iPhone in studio mode with the right lighting. So this is another way to do it. However, if you're looking to really grow beyond just referrals from ALMA or Headway, you might want to think about marketing. And I also mentioned this before, Facebook marketing, Instagram ads, this kind of thing. Digital ads, although costly, you are able to take your content that you make, so maybe it's image or a flyer, and you can push it out to a specific audience. You see tons of big companies doing ads all over the place. You see even places like McDonald's advertising, right? So I think advertising is going to be a way that can really step up your growth but people hesitant because it's costly and it's a learning curve. But that's my suggestion. Let's see. When a client finishes therapy, do you need to have a discharge plan? Also, what if a client disappears? How do you document attempts? It's a very clinically nuanced question. And I don't think that there is a cookie cutter response. I think what you want to do is follow the guidelines that are set in place by whatever state you're located in. And again, this is a hard one to answer specifically because it's going to be a different depending on, it's so contextual depending on the context. But I'll leave a link down below to the New York State website with some more helpful info about this and things that are required. If you're looking for a surefire answer to these questions, I would also encourage you to contact the attorney that I'm mentioning down below. He is a healthcare attorney who works specifically with therapists. He would know that answer right away, be able to answer specifically for you. So, and that's another thing you might want to consider. This guy is located in New York. He is licensed in New York as an attorney. So everyone's been asking some really awesome questions. I'm really glad to be here answering them for you guys. I'm going to hang out for a little while longer. Questions have continued to come in. Excuse me. So I'll answer more as they come in. If you're just joining, welcome. You can put your questions down below. If the questions die out for a little while, I'll eventually log out and finish up my day. But I'll be hanging out for a little while. If you haven't been here before, thank you so much for joining. If you could subscribe to this channel, that's really helpful. It really helps me to make more videos like this, which I really love to do. I will also be going live again tomorrow, sometime in the afternoon, I think around 1. You'll see that pop up on social media, but probably around 1. We'll do this again tomorrow. So if you are late or just joining, feel free to log back in tomorrow. And all these get recorded and put on the channel, so you can watch any of the live streams later on as well. You're welcome. Really enjoyed doing this. I'm glad you appreciate it. Thank you for the thank you. If you're interested in consultation, send me an email. That'll be down below. It's just, you see it on the screen, Matthew Ryan, LCSW. It's at gmail.com. Matthew Ryan, LCSW at gmail.com. That will also be down below in the description. Looks like the questions are starting to slow down a little bit. It's been awesome answering your questions, being with you guys. I'll hang out for 2-3 more minutes. So if a question or two comes in, I'm happy to answer it. If not, I will log out by 4. If I could start my practice again from scratch, is there, is there anything you would do differently? Wow, that's a great question. Let me think. What would I do differently? Actually, there's one thing I would do differently. It's more of a mindset, I would say. So one thing that I was fixated on was having everything perfect. I wanted every word in my intake packet perfect. I wanted my PLLC fully established. I wanted to know every answer to every question that I had, which is why now I'm able to answer a lot of questions because I did a lot of painstaking research. However, in some regard, it perhaps delayed my start and made things a little bit more anxiety provoking than they needed to be because mistakes are inevitable and mistakes are okay. That doesn't mean we want to go completely reckless mode and just do whatever and not do any research. At the same time, I think we do want to be flexible with ourselves and know that even when we start a business, start a private practice, you're going to make mistakes and that's okay. So we're stepping into a world where it's thought through and calculated and researched, and also we're taking a risk. There's always a risk involved. And that's one thing I would do differently, would be to perhaps be a little bit more flexible, not needing every answer before jumping in. And then secondly, I don't know if I would do this differently, but I have more information, so I don't know. But I talk about it differently now. Is I may have considered doing the DBA initially. That way I could have started quicker and then doing the PLLC. But again, I knew that I wanted a group practice perhaps in the future, so I don't think I would do it differently. But I learned after doing the PLLC that was not required for solo practice. But that is a great question. You're welcome. All right, it's been awesome, and we will wrap up here for today. Again, I do these every so often. Follow me on social media. I'm typically posting about this on Instagram, but I don't do much on Instagram. I'm mostly on YouTube here. So again, if you could subscribe down below, share this with people, that really helps me out. But for updates and things, you check out my newsletter, Instagram. That will give you tips on when I'm doing things like this. But it's been great, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and I hope to see you soon.